He had just gotten off the bus without taking off his old backpack yet, when he saw a policeman beating a girl in the middle of a busy street. It wasn't the noise that made him stop. It was a tone of voice that made his skin crawl, a threatening intonation he knew too well from his years in the barracks. Sergeant Marcus Thorne had spent 3 years in Afghanistan, where every sunrise brought the possibility of never seeing another sunset. His hands, weathered by desert sand and hardened by rifle grips, still trembled when he heard unexpected loud sounds. The weight of his military backpack felt familiar against his shoulders, a constant reminder of the battles he'd fought. Marcus was Special Forces, trained to detect danger, and read body language like a survival manual. His brown eyes, which had seen too much for a man of 35, carried both the strength of a warrior and the gentleness of a father who had missed 3 birthdays, 3 Christmases, and countless bedtime stories. The Purple Heart in his jacket pocket was earned from IED shrapnel that nearly took his left leg. Physical wounds heal, but the invisible scars that made him wake up in cold sweats were harder to mend. The only medicine that worked was the thought of reuniting with his 7-year-old daughter, Sage. Sage Thorne was not like other children her age. While classmates worried about homework, she counted days on a calendar marked with red X's, each one bringing her closer to Daddy's promised return. Her intelligent hazel eyes held depths of understanding that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old mind. She was small for her age, with copper-colored hair that caught sunlight like autumn leaves. Sage possessed an old soul's wisdom, speaking in complete sentences since age 3, and reading chapter books while peers struggled with pictures. But intelligence couldn't protect her from the abandonment she felt when her father's deployment was extended twice. The little girl who once danced at her father's guitar had grown quiet, introspective. She kept a shoebox under her bed filled with every letter Marcus had sent, each one read so many times the paper had grown soft as fabric. Her most prized possession was a photo of them at the state fair, both covered in cotton candy and laughter. Before deployment, Marcus and Sage had been inseparable. Saturday mornings meant pancake cooking competitions, where flour ended up everywhere except the bowl. Marcus would deliberately make lopsided pancakes just to hear Sage's infectious giggle. Their evening ritual was sacred. After dinner, they'd curl up on the worn leather couch, while Marcus read adventure stories in different voices, pirates with theatrical accents, princesses with British elegance. Sage would interrupt with questions. "Daddy, why doesn't the dragon just talk to the villagers instead of scaring them?" Weekends were for exploration. Marcus would pack sandwiches, and they'd hike local trails where he taught her to identify bird calls and track animal prints. "See these marks, little warrior?" he'd say, kneeling beside her. "Every creature leaves traces of where they've been." Their bond was built on trust and unconditional love. When neighborhood kids teased her about her unusual name, Marcus explained, "Sage means wisdom, sweetheart. You're named for someone who sees clearly. Never let anyone make you ashamed of being different." The deployment order came on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was making Sage's lunch when his phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. Emergency deployment to Afghanistan. Report for duty in 72 hours. He stared at the screen, watching Sage humming while she tied her shoes for school. How do you tell a 6-year-old that her entire world is about to shift? That evening, Marcus sat Sage down at their kitchen table. "Princess, Daddy has to go help some people far away. It's what soldiers do. We protect others who can't protect themselves." Her face fell, but she listened with the maturity that always amazed him. "How long?" she asked simply. 6 months, he lied, knowing it could be much longer. They spent the next 2 days making memories, visiting every place that mattered. The park, the ice cream shop, the library. Marcus took hundreds of photos, trying to capture her essence before leaving. Finding care for Sage was Marcus's biggest challenge. His ex-wife had died in a car accident when Sage was 3. His own parents were too elderly to handle an energetic child. The choice came down to his sister Margaret or foster care. Margaret Thorne Walsh appeared perfect. She lived in the same town, had raised 2 children, and worked as a church secretary, a pillar of the community. During their meetings, she doted on Sage, promising home-cooked meals and stability. "She'll be like my own daughter," Margaret assured him with tears in her eyes. "Family takes care of family." Marcus hugged her gratefully, believing he'd found the perfect guardian. The night before deployment, Marcus tucked Sage into bed at Margaret's house. "Remember, Princess, I'll call every week, and Aunt Margaret will take good care of you." He kissed her forehead. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I love you more than all the fish in the ocean," she whispered back. What Marcus didn't see was Margaret's expression change the moment his truck disappeared around the corner. The transformation began slowly. For the first month, Margaret maintained the facade during Marcus's video calls. Sage appeared clean and reasonably happy on screen. But when cameras turned off, a different reality emerged. Margaret's resentment surfaced in small ways. "Your father dumped you here and ran off to play soldier," she'd mutter while doing dishes. When Sage asked for help with homework, Margaret snapped, "Figure it out yourself. I'm not your personal tutor." The first physical punishment came when Sage accidentally broke a coffee mug. Margaret's hand struck fast across the little girl's cheek. "Clumsy little brat. Do you know how much that cost?" Sage touched her burning cheek, too shocked to cry. Margaret immediately softened, pulling her close. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Aunt Margaret just got upset. We won't tell Daddy about this, will we?" Sage learned her first lesson in keeping secrets that day. The breaking point came during Marcus's third month of deployment. Sage, missing her father desperately, had been crying at bedtime. Margaret stormed into the room. "Shut up. I'm sick of your crying. Your father doesn't care about you. If he did, he wouldn't have left." That night, Sage moved from the guest bedroom to the basement. The basement became Sage's prison. Margaret claimed it was temporary punishment for being ungrateful, but days stretched into weeks. The concrete floor was cold, and the single bare bulb provided harsh light. Her meals became irregular, sometimes just crackers and water, sometimes nothing at all. Margaret's cruelty seemed to feed on itself. She would stand at the basement stairs, looking down at the small figure huddled on a thin mattress. "This is what happens to children who aren't appreciated," she'd say coldly. Sage's clothes became dirty and torn. Bath time was eliminated entirely. The little girl's hair became matted. Her fingernails grew long and dirty, and her small frame began showing malnutrition effects. The psychological abuse was worse than physical neglect. Margaret would bring down photos of her own children's birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. "See how happy real families are," she'd taunt. "This is what you'll never have because your father abandoned you." During video calls with Marcus, Margaret would clean Sage up, just enough to avoid suspicion, coaching her on what to say. "Tell Daddy you're fine, or there will be consequences." Sage learned to smile on command and protect both her father and herself from Margaret's wrath. Elena Rodriguez lived next door and had always been friendly with the family. As a social worker, she was trained to notice signs of distress in children. Something about Sage's increasingly rare appearances troubled her deeply. The little girl she remembered as bright and talkative had become a shadow. When Elena did catch glimpses of Sage, the child appeared thin, withdrawn, and constantly fearful. Her clothes hung loose on her shrinking frame, and she never seemed to play or laugh anymore. Elena began documenting what she observed. Sage disappeared for days at a time. When she did appear, it was briefly, usually to take out garbage, tasks too mature for a 7-year-old. The child's hair was often unbrushed, her clothes stained, and she moved with careful, quiet steps of someone afraid to make noise. At Jefferson Elementary, Sage's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed dramatic changes too. The previously engaged student became silent and withdrawn. Her academic performance plummeted from inability to concentrate. During lunch, Sage would sit alone, picking at food she claimed she wasn't hungry for. Most disturbing were the behavioral changes. Sage flinched when adults approached unexpectedly. She hoarded food from school lunches, stuffing crackers into her pockets. During recess, instead of playing, she would sit alone, staring with eyes too old for her face. 3 months into deployment, Marcus began noticing changes during their video calls. Sage's responses became shorter, more guarded. Her natural curiosity about his experiences disappeared. Most troubling, she stopped asking when he was coming home. The little girl who once chattered excitedly now gave one-word answers. "How was school today, Princess?" "Fine. What did you learn?" "Nothing." But her eyes told a different story. Marcus shared his concerns with his battle buddy, Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison. "Something's wrong, man. She's not herself. Margaret keeps saying everything's fine, but my gut is screaming otherwise. Jake, a father of 3, listened carefully. Trust your instincts, Thorne. Kids don't change like that without reason. Sleep became elusive for Marcus. Between combat stress and worry about Sage, he found himself staring at her photo for hours. The father in him recognized distress even when the soldier in him was thousands of miles away. The breaking point came during a video call in Marcus's 4th month of deployment. Sage appeared on screen, with a visible bruise on her forehead. Margaret quickly explained it away. She fell off her bike. Kids, you know how they are. But Sage's eyes met her father's through the camera with a look he'd never seen before. Pure, desperate fear. That night, Marcus made a decision that could end his military career. He submitted a hardship discharge request, citing family emergency. When his commanding officer initially denied it, Marcus went over his head, then over that person's head, until someone listened. Sergeant Thorne, you're 3 months from end of deployment. Are you certain you can't wait? His colonel asked during their final meeting. Marcus looked him straight in the eye. Sir, with all due respect, my daughter needs me now, not in 3 months, now. The discharge process took 2 weeks. 2 weeks during which Marcus barely slept, consumed with worry about what was happening at home. He called Elena Rodriguez, having gotten her number from old neighborhood records. Their conversation confirmed his worst fears. Mr. Thorne, I've been wanting to contact you for months, Elena said carefully. I'm concerned about Sage's well-being. As a mandated reporter, I'm obligated to share what I've observed. Her detailed account of Sage's deteriorating condition made Marcus's blood run cold. Within 24 hours of receiving his discharge papers, Marcus was on a plane home. The Greyhound bus wheezed to a stop at the small depot on Main Street. Marcus shouldered his worn backpack, the same one that had carried him through 3 deployments, and stepped onto familiar pavement. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of falling leaves and the promise of winter. He'd planned to surprise Sage, to see her genuine reaction before anyone could coach her. But as he walked toward Margaret's neighborhood, something felt wrong. The streets seemed too quiet, the atmosphere too tense. His combat-trained instincts, honed by years of detecting threats, began tingling with unease. Turning the corner onto Elm Street, Marcus saw a crowd gathered near the playground. Police cars with flashing lights created a chaotic light show against the autumn sky. His pace quickened as he recognized the location, just 2 blocks from Margaret's house. That's when he saw her, a small figure in dirty clothes being dragged across the pavement by a uniformed police officer. The child was crying, struggling against hands too large and rough for her tiny frame. Other adults stood watching, some recording with their phones, others just staring like it was entertainment. Marcus's world stopped. The little girl being manhandled by the officer had copper-colored hair, matted and unwashed. She wore clothes that were too big, torn at the seams, filthy with substances he didn't want to identify. Her small feet were bare, cut and bleeding from the rough concrete, but it was her face that broke something fundamental inside Marcus. Sage's face, gaunt and hollow-cheeked, with eyes that held terrors no child should know. His bright, curious, beautiful daughter looked like a refugee from a war zone. Marcus moved with the deadly precision of a special forces operator. Years of combat training took over as he assessed the situation in milliseconds. The officer, a large man with sergeant stripes, was using excessive force on a child. Bystanders were failing to intervene. His daughter was in immediate danger. Officer, stop! Marcus's command voice carried across the street with the authority of someone used to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. Release the child immediately. Officer Bradley Connors turned, his face flushed with anger and something else, embarrassment at being challenged publicly. This doesn't concern you, pal. Move along. He tightened his grip on Sage's arm, making her whimper. That whimper triggered something primal in Marcus. He covered the distance between them in 3 strides, his military bearing making other officers step back instinctively. That child is my daughter, and you will release her now. Daddy? Sage's voice was so small, so broken, that it nearly brought Marcus to his knees. But fury kept him upright. Connors looked between Marcus and Sage, his bravado faltering. Your daughter was caught stealing food from Morrison's grocery. She's been living on the streets for days. Where the hell have you been? Living on the streets. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. While he was serving his country, his child had been reduced to stealing food to survive. His hands clenched into fists as he fought to maintain control. I've been deployed overseas, serving this country that pays your salary, Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet. Now release my daughter, or I will make this situation very unpleasant for you. The crowd had grown, phones capturing every moment. Someone had called the real police, not just Connors, who Marcus now realized was private security, not actual law enforcement. The sound of approaching sirens added urgency to an already volatile situation. Elena Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, her social worker credentials, giving her authority to intervene. Officer Connors, as a mandated reporter, I need to inform you that this child has been subject to severe neglect. She shouldn't be treated as a criminal. What are you talking about? Marcus demanded, kneeling to Sage's level. Up close, the damage was even worse. His daughter weighed maybe half what she should. Her skin was pale and bruised. Her hair so matted it would probably need to be cut off completely. But worst of all were her eyes. Hollow, fearful, empty of the spark that once made her special. Elena's professional composure cracked as she explained. Mr. Thorne, Sage has been living in Margaret's basement for months. I've documented evidence of severe neglect, possible abuse, and intentional malnutrition. She's been scavenging for food because she's been systematically starved. The words hit Marcus like artillery fire. His sister, the woman he'd trusted with his most precious possession, had tortured his child. Where is Margaret now? His voice carried a lethal edge that made even the watching police officers nervous. She left town 3 days ago, Elena continued, cleaned out her bank accounts and disappeared. Sage has been surviving on the streets since then. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her. The little girl who once danced around their living room now stood like a broken bird, too afraid to move, too damaged to trust even him. Her small hand reached out tentatively, as if she wasn't sure she had permission to touch her own father. I'm here, princess, he whispered, gathering her carefully into his arms. She felt like a feather, all bones and fear. Daddy's here. No one will ever hurt you again. The hospital examination confirmed Elena's worst fears. Dr. Sarah Chen pulled Marcus aside after examining Sage. Her face was grim as she delivered the devastating assessment. Mr. Thorne, your daughter is severely malnourished and dehydrated. She's lost approximately 30% of her body weight. There's evidence of prolonged physical abuse, healed fractures, burn marks, and extensive scarring consistent with beating. Dr. Chen paused, struggling with her composure. This is among the worst cases of child abuse I've documented. Child Protective Services arrived within hours, led by Supervisor Janet Holbrook. Her stern expression told Marcus this wouldn't be simple. Mr. Thorne, while you're Sage's biological father, her placement with your sister occurred through legal guardianship papers you signed. The abuse happened under your approved arrangement. Are you suggesting this is my fault? Marcus's voice carried controlled fury. I'm suggesting we need thorough investigation before releasing Sage to your custody. There will be home inspections, psychological evaluations, and supervised visitation until we determine you're a fit guardian. The system that should have protected his daughter was now treating him like the enemy. Marcus hired the best family lawyer he could afford, Rebecca Martinez, a former military JAG officer. This system failed your daughter once, she told him. We won't let it fail her again. Word of Sage's situation spread through the military community like wildfire. Marcus's unit, still deployed in Afghanistan, started a crowdfunding campaign that raised $50,000 in less than a week. The money went toward legal fees, medical treatment, and establishing a stable home for Sage. Local veterans organizations rallied around the case. Vietnam veterans, Gulf War veterans, Iraq veterans, men and women who understood the sacrifice of leaving family to serve country, all united behind Marcus and Sage. Their collective voice carried political weight that couldn't be ignored. The media attention intensified when Elena Rodriguez, risking her career, spoke publicly about the system's failures. I reported concerns about this child multiple times, she told local news reporters. My reports were filed, processed, and forgotten while a little girl suffered. Her testimony sparked outrage about bureaucratic failures that allowed abuse to continue unchecked. Dr. Amanda Foster, a child psychologist specializing in trauma recovery, volunteered her services pro bono. After extensive sessions with Sage, she provided testimony that proved crucial to the case. This child has survived severe trauma through remarkable resilience, Dr. Foster testified. Her bond with her father remains strong despite their separation. Continuing to keep them apart will cause further psychological damage. Most importantly, Sage herself found her voice. In a recorded session with Dr. Foster, she described her months with Margaret in heartbreaking detail. Her testimony, while difficult to hear, provided the evidence necessary to prove the extent of abuse and Marcus's complete ignorance of the situation. Margaret Thorne Walsh was apprehended 6 weeks later in Phoenix, Arizona, attempting to establish a new identity with forged documents. She'd stolen over $40,000 from various sources, including military family support funds intended for Sage's care. The trial became a media sensation. Margaret's defense attorney tried to paint her as an overwhelmed caregiver who made poor decisions under stress. But Elena Rodriguez's documented observations, Dr. Chen's medical testimony, and Sage's recorded statements painted a clear picture of systematic abuse. Officer Bradley Connors faced charges of excessive force and child endangerment. Security footage from the grocery store showed him grabbing Sage roughly and using unnecessary force on a starving child who had taken a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. His conviction sent a message about appropriate treatment of vulnerable populations. The most damning evidence came from Margaret's own diary, discovered in her abandoned house. Entries revealed her resentment toward Marcus, her jealousy of military families receiving support, and her deliberate decision to punish Sage as revenge against her brother. "She's his precious princess," one entry read. "Let's see how precious she is when he comes home." Margaret received 8 years in prison for child abuse, theft, and fraud. Connors was sentenced to 2 years and banned from any law enforcement role. More importantly for Marcus and Sage, the court granted him full custody and expunged any questions about his fitness as a parent. Recovery wasn't instant. Sage's physical healing took months of careful nutrition and medical treatment, but her emotional recovery would take much longer. Dr. Foster warned Marcus that trauma of this severity creates lasting changes in a child's brain. The first weeks were hardest. Sage hoarded food, hiding crackers in every pocket. She couldn't sleep alone, plagued by nightmares that left her screaming Marcus's name. Loud noises sent her into panic attacks that could last hours. Marcus left his military career, taking a security job that let him work from home. His daughter needed him more than his country did now. Every morning, he made breakfast while she watched from the doorway, still not quite believing the food was really for her. Slowly, they began rebuilding their relationship. Marcus read to her every night, the same ritual they'd shared before deployment, but gentler now. He taught her guitar, her small fingers struggling with strings while her face showed the concentration he remembered. The breakthrough came 4 months later. Sage was struggling with a puzzle when she looked up and said, "Daddy, will you help me? I can't figure this part out." It was the first time since his return that she'd asked for help, a sign she was beginning to trust again. 1 year later, Marcus and Sage stood in the backyard of their new house, a small, cheerful place with a garden where they grew vegetables together. The little girl who had once been reduced to stealing food now helped plan grocery shopping trips and cook family meals. Sage had gained back the weight and grown 3 inches. Her hair, cut short after the matted mess was removed, now bounced in healthy copper curls, but most importantly, the light had returned to her eyes. She still had difficult days, but she was healing. Dr. Foster had explained that Sage would always carry trauma scars, but with love and stability she could build a fulfilling life. "She's incredibly resilient," the psychologist assured him. Children who survive trauma often develop extraordinary empathy and strength. The veteran community that supported them during the crisis remained crucial to their lives. Other military families dealing with deployment challenges often sought Marcus's advice. Sage started writing letters to deployed military parents, offering encouragement. "Sometimes daddies and mommies have to go away to keep us safe. That doesn't mean they don't love us." What began as a father's worst nightmare became a story of resilience, justice, and the unbreakable bond between parent and child. Marcus's decision to trust his instincts and come home when his daughter needed him most demonstrated that sometimes the greatest act of service is protecting one's own family. Sage's recovery inspired changes in the child protective system. Elena Rodriguez was promoted and implemented new protocols for follow-up on abuse reports. Margaret's case became a teaching example about the importance of thorough investigation and the dangers of assuming family members are automatically safe caregivers. Most importantly, Sage herself embodied the possibility of healing after severe trauma. Her journey from a broken, starving child to a confident young girl planning to become a pediatric nurse showed that with enough love and support, even the deepest wounds can heal. On quiet evenings, Marcus and Sage would sit on their front porch, watching sunset paint the sky. She would lean against his shoulder while he played guitar, both grateful for the simple miracle of being together, safe and loved. "Daddy," she said one evening, "I'm glad you came home when you did." "Me too, princess. Me too. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they're fought in our own neighborhoods, for the safety of our own children. And sometimes it's about a little girl who survived hell and still had enough love left in her heart to forgive, heal, and dream of helping other children find their way home too."